All right, you guys. Okay, so quiet down. Let me get everyone's attention, please. We're gonna start on the second lecture of today, which is Chordata. Oh man, this is our last phylum. Do we recognize Chordata? What's a Chordata? What's an example? Whales, animals, fish, maybe, right? A lot of the animals that we had in our pilot extra credit assignment were chordates, right? So Chordata, we are done with the invertebrates pretty much, okay? We finished talking about all the invertebrates, Porifera, Nigerians, those kind of things. All right, in 2 short weeks, we have covered all the invertebrates, and now we're moving on to organisms that possibly have a backbone, okay? I gotta use the word possibly because invertebrates are so tenacious. They're invertebrate chordates out there. Okay, so we're gonna see, right? So Chordata, right? Moving on to the last phylum. This phylum is the most important phylum. Okay, you guys have to know this phylum because you're in this phylum, so you better at least know your own phylum, right? So this is the most important phylum, and we're gonna spend a lot of time on it. Okay, we're gonna spend 3 days on this, and we're gonna try to finish most of it, like 60% of it by the end of tomorrow, so that we're ready for the test. But other than that, yeah, let's get started. Chordata, right? So by now, our phylogeny looks like this. We have covered all these organisms. Let's name them off real quick. What is this? Porifera, Cnidaria. Well, I mean, there's a bunch, but this particular one is Annelida, because it's at the segments. This Mollusca, Arthropoda, and Echinodermata, right? Okay, close enough. So we just learned this one. Right? Sea stars, sea urchins, echinoderms, right? Spiny skin organism that have radial symmetry, pentameral symmetry, and 2 feet, right? Okay, so I'm about to reveal this mystery organism right here. Maybe anybody that had any guesses?
It's a cat.
It is a largemouth bass. Okay, so anyways, this is our last phylum, right? We're going to talk about that. Let's take a look at these organisms, right? Look, a lot of these seem familiar, right? Cats, sharks, dogs, mice, right? Dolphins, squirrels, dinosaurs, humans, right? Okay, all sorts of these organisms, probably really prevalent, right? We're exposed to it often because we are chordates and we're biased that way, right? Our favorite animal pets are all chordates. Okay, so Chordata, right? What does Chordata mean? You see how Chordata is spelled with CH, chord, not CO? Okay, that's because notochord, right? Everybody has a notochord. That is the first of 4 important chordatan features, right? So everybody has a notochord, and what's it for? Well, it's back support, right? It supports, the structure of your back. It's the basis of an internal skeleton, which means all your other bones are connected to it. But the primary purpose is to support and protect something called the dorsal nerve cord right here. Okay, that's the main point of the notochord. And you guys can see in the previous picture our version of the notochord is our spine. Right? Okay, this series of bones down our back is our notochord. All right. Not everybody has a notochord that looks like this. Right? There's chordates out there that don't have a bony notochord, right? But we do, okay? And the primary purpose of it is, well, the nerve cord that runs right through it, protects it. The dorsal nerve cord, right? Dorsal, okay? This is the perfect time to introduce 2 body positions. We know front and back already, right? What is front? Anterior, and back is posterior, right? You get those 2 body positions if you are bilaterally symmetric. But now we should also know top and bottom, or back and stomach, okay? So the back, where this part of your body is called dorsal, and where your stomach is located is called ventral, okay? Dorsal and ventral surfaces on your body, okay? And so if we have a dorsal nerve cord, that means our nerve cord runs from here along the back, okay? So if we observe this familiar organism right here, the cat, this nerve cord is on the back. You're probably thinking, big whoop, everybody has this. Of course you guys have it, and you're familiar with it, but I'll have you guys know this is rare in the animal kingdom. A dorsal nerve cord is the second defining feature of Chordata, right? Let me just show you something in contrary. lobster, right? Look at these. You guys figure out where the nerve cord is? Where is it? What color is it, first of all? Yellow. Where is it running? Along its stomach. Yeah, it's a ventral nerve cord. You see, sorry, a dorsal nerve cord is not all that common. Other organisms out there have a ventral nerve cord, right? Let's talk about this for a while. Where should your nerve cord be? Should it be dorsal or should it be ventral? Okay, I'll give you a hint, right? Where is the strongest part on the lobster's body? What's this called? What's that called? The starts with a C, remember? Carapace, yeah, okay, it's carapace. The hardest part of its shell, of most animal shell, is along its back. Why? Because its back is exposed to the environment and it needs protection, right? The turtle doesn't have that hard of a shell down here. Its hardest part of the shell is actually back there, right? You hear the term soft underbelly. Why do you have a soft underbelly? Because that part is never exposed to the environment anyways, so you don't need to expend energy protecting it. You guys see that? Look, notice how they put their nerve cord back there? Because it's the furthest away from danger, the back. So who's doing it the right way here? Right? All the other organisms. Okay? Chordata is doing it kind of in a very backwards way by putting their nerve cord along their back, which is the most exposed, right? You know, when people do fighting and stuff, you're not allowed to hit someone in the back. Why not? That's the easiest way to win, right? But, you know, we don't do that just for ethical reasons. But you see how, like, it's a bad place to put it? You can't defend your back, right? So, you know, like, that's just not a good idea in general. So that's why we need a notochord. You guys see that? So to accompany a dorsal nerve cord, a nerve cord placed in a pretty bad position, evolutionarily, we also got to gain a notochord to help support and protect it. All right, and on us it's a spine. Okay, so we have a notochord. These guys do not have a notochord. And if you want to know what is the most humane way of killing a crab or lobster before you boil it, you take a knife and shove it through its stomach because you're hitting its nervous system, right? Okay. So nerve cord supposed to be along the stomach, but chordates along our back. And so to protect us, we have a notochord, right? Okay, so dorsal nerve cord, that's the second thing. What's the third feature? Gill slits. You guys know what this is? This is an axolotl, right? It's a type of salamander, and it has pretty distinct gill slits. Okay, what are gills for? Breathing in the water. Okay, they're no good at breathing on land, but they're the best thing to use if you want to breathe the water. All right, well, I'm putting gill slits up here as an essential chordata feature. All chordates have it. Do you have it? We don't breathe using gills, we use lungs. So here's the question. Using your C-star logic, remember with the bilateral symmetry thing? How can we figure out if humans and other mammals and stuff actually have gill slits? Yeah, we should look at its larval stage, right? Let's look at the larval stage of a human, right? It's called an embryo. What do you see here? The larval stage never lies, right? Turns out we actually have gill slits like a shark. You see that? Gill slits. What other body feature is present as an embryo that we don't have as an adult? Yeah, you guys see it right here? So here are the limbs, but look, a tail, right? Turns out a post-anal tail is the fourth feature that all chordates have, right? Well, let's talk about the tail real quick. Why is it so critical that it's post-anal tail, right? Behind the anus, right? So if you have a cat, its digestive tract ends right there, and its tail starts. You see that? Okay, that seems familiar to you. What's the big deal? Let's go back to the lobster. That's a tail, isn't it? Right? Everybody can agree, this is a tail. It's a lobster tail. Going back to its anatomy, you see where its digestive tract ends? The brown one? Is this a post-anal tail? Its tail that starts right here? No, that one would be a pre-anal tail. You guys see that? Turns out most animals with tails, and it's actually their digestive tract ends at the end of their tail, right? But in the case of chordata, the tail doesn't start until the end of their digestive tract. So it's like after here, then you have a tail, right? That's the case for chordata, post-anal tail. Okay, so those are our 4 features, right? You see on a human, we don't have the tail anymore, but if you look at our bones, we have the remains of what used to be our tail, right? Our tailbone, okay, called the coccyx. Okay, that tailbone used to be a tail. So if you look like a monkey, right, a relative of the human with an actual tail, the tail bones are connected to the end of this bone right there. Okay, it's just our tail is so small, right? The scientific word for small is reduced. It is so reduced that it no longer protrudes from our body, and we don't see a physical tail anymore, right? But we actually have one, right? It's just a tiny tail that we no longer see, right? So what is that? Something that's so small that it does not perform the same functions as before, we call that vestigial, right? You guys heard of this word before. Vestigial refers to a body part that has been reduced. It's really small, and it's kind of useless, right? It doesn't really work anymore. Okay, so a good example that I like to use are, I'd say our toes are pretty vestigial. Okay, everybody likes to say appendix and stuff like that, but I don't like those examples. Nobody even knows what appendix is, right? But our toes, right? Like, we use our toes for walking, that's true, but can you grab things with your toes as proficiently as you can with your hands, right? Go look at a gorilla, right? It's got hands for feet. They can climb trees way better than we can because they're literally grabbing on with 4 hands, right? So they have actual functioning toes, big toe, whereas our big toe is pretty much vestigial, right? Okay, so we have a vestigial tail. Let's revisit arthropoda real quick to talk about some vestigial feature. I want to point out, it's pretty interesting. Right, so here's a crab. A crab is in, the order Decapoda. Okay, so it goes, what's the top one? Domain, kingdom, phylum, order, right? Is that right? No, class, sorry. Class, order, all right? So, order Decapoda, which means that it has 10 legs, right? So let's see if it checks out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 legs and 2 claws. That is 10, right? This is a normal crab, right? A true crab, a striped shore crab, right? My favorite species. Here's a porcelain crab. Okay, it's also a crab, but what do you notice about its legs? Shape. Well, besides the shape, it has 6 legs and 2 claws. So 8. But a porcelain crab is under the same order, Decapoda. Shouldn't have 10, but it looks like it only has 8. Maybe you guys can kind of get where this is going, right? Okay, let's look at this crab. It's a king crab, right? Alaskan king crab. By the way, I bought this. This is the picture I took myself. I paid over $200 for this, so I wanted a fresh one. But count its legs. 6. All right, 6 legs and 2 claws. What's going on here? Where are the extra 2 legs that a normal crab has, right? Well, if you take a look at the back of the shell, the carapace, pry it open a little bit, it will reveal a tiny leg. You guys see that? Vestigial, right? That's a vestigial leg, and so when I pull them out, now can you see? It actually has 8 legs, but, 2 vestigial ones, right? Okay, yeah, Giovanni?
Is that a deformity, or is that just like how it is?
That's just how it is. So it's not a deformity. This group of crabs has vestigial legs, right? Just like how you have a vestigial tail, right, Arlene?
Wait, what about the spider crab? Don't they have like 8 legs?
Spider crab is a true crab, so it has 8 legs. Hey, nothing wrong with that. But a king crab has 2 vestigial legs, not a true crab. Right, yes?
Evolutionarily, why would they select for the little one?
Oh, why would they select for that? I'll get into that in a second, okay? I can give you a little brief tidbit. I don't want to get too far into it, but I could kind of explain why. So let's take a look at the porcelain crab, compared to the king crab. Maybe if you look at the zoomed in picture, you'll see this thing and this thing. 2 vestigial legs hiding in the back, right? Okay, tucked away, not being used, okay? And same with hermit crabs. If you ever counted the legs on a hermit crab, it only has 4. And if you pull it out from inside of a shell, it is hiding 4 vestigial legs. So these three group crabs are not actual crabs. Okay, they're part of a separate group of Decapoda, right? Which is a type of arthropod. It's a separate group, just like how shrimp and lobsters are also separate from crabs. Okay, so like the distance between shrimp and crab is almost like the distance between this group of crabs and real crabs. Okay, real crabs we call true crabs, right? Like over here on the left. Trapdoor crab, Dungeness crab, mud crab, sheep crab, right? They all have 8 legs and 2 claws. And this is actually a separate group. Okay, so, okay, let's try to answer your question, why do they have those things? Okay, they're all decapods, so they have it in their genes to make 10 legs, all right? Usually 8 legs and 2 claws. But in this case, it's probably that, well, first of all, the reason why they're shaped the same and we call them crabs is convergent evolution, which we just saw last time, right? Two sort of unrelated things having the same feature, these things end up looking like crabs even though they're not crabs, right? So convergent evolution caused them to have the same shape, but probably it's that when they developed 3 pairs of walking legs to 6, it was probably enough to get by. And evolution doesn't shoot for the stars, okay? Evolution shoots for just barely passing, okay? Because evolution doesn't care about success, or I mean success in like with flying colors. It cares about C- level success, okay? So whatever is just barely good enough to survive is gonna be there, right? On occasion, evolution will create an anomaly that's way better than it should be, like the human brain, for example, right? But usually it'll create something that is just good enough to survive. And like in this case, 6 is what's good enough, and evolution cannot get rid of you unless it is lethal, right? So since having 6 legs does not kill them, then they will have 6 legs, all right? If having 6 legs is woefully inferior to 8, these will go extinct pretty soon, okay? But it turns out 6 is fine. I mean, look at the most diverse group of organisms in the whole world, insects, and all of them have 6 legs. So 6 is okay, right? 8 is also okay, right? Spiders have 8 legs as well. Okay. So why did they choose to have those? They didn't really choose it. It's just that they got the dice roll of 6, and those got the dice roll of 8, and both of them work. Okay. Evolution will only get rid of things if the dice roll turns something bad. Okay. Does that make sense? I don't know. Like evolution is a different topic. Okay. So if you want to know more about it, we can talk about after class. It's not required for this class. Okay. Just know that the word vestigial means a type of body part that is, small and no longer used. Okay, like those things. And then, you can use the vestigial features to show that these are in a different group. Okay, yeah, Joe Brian?
So, what's that, I don't know if you know this, but it's like the little thing inside your body that we no longer use to like digest like red meat.
Like the appendix?
Appendix, yeah, is that a vestigial?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it earlier as, everybody's go-to for a vestigial feature, but I mean, nobody really knows what that is anyways. I mean, people just say it because it rolls off their tongue. But, I mean, something that's much more obviously vestigial, in my opinion, is your big toe. Because it's not a thumb anymore. Right? Which it used to be, like chimpanzees. Well, look at their big toe. Okay. So, let's go back to Chordata, alright? So Chordata has these 4 features, right? I'll show you guys on this picture of a human. This is called the Vitruvian Man if you're interested in this drawing, right? Dorsal nerve cord supported by its node cord, right? Gill slits and posterior tail, right? Those are the two later things are the ones that you don't see anymore because we have them during our embryonic stage, and then the 2 are what we see as an adult. But, there may be some chordate out there that has all 4 of them at the same time, of course, right? Okay, so any questions on the Chordata? All right, most important group, so make sure we know this one, right? Okay, let's move on and talk about different types of Chordata, okay? Now, Chordata is a phylum. We're going to split Chordata into 3 subphylum. We don't really talk about subphylum that much, but we will here because one of the subphyla is really unique, and the other 2 subphyla offers an interesting view of Chordata as a whole. For example, this one, subphylum Chordata, are this group of organisms right here called tunicates or sea squirts. Right? So if you ever see a sea squirt, I know in Korean markets they sell sea squirts as food. Can't believe people eat that. You know, you have a sea squirt here, a tunicate, and subphylum Chordata. Right? Let's take a look at its anatomy. First of all, you notice that its symmetry is what? What type of symmetry? Bilateral, right? It's not radial, for sure. It doesn't branch off in all directions. And if it is bilateral symmetry, where is its line of symmetry? Let's figure that out.
In the middle of the.
So like in between, like this. What do you guys think? Is it a mirror image on both sides? Or is there a better way to make a mirror image? How about sideways? Through both siphons. Okay? Like this. That's their line of symmetry, right? Okay, so bilaterally symmetric organisms, and they have these two tubes, right? I just said it. What are these tubes called again? Siphons, yeah. And what are siphons used for? Breathing, yeah, exactly. So these things use their siphons to get water to go in and out, and they breathe, like a clam, right? A clam, a bivalve, they do that. What else do clams use their siphons for? Filter feeding, exactly. So maybe you guys can guess, considering the fact that this tunicate is living on the ground. What kind of lifestyle? Sessile, so what is its feeding style probably? Also filter feeding with its siphons, right? Okay, so filter feeding with its siphons because it is sessile, right? These little tunicates stay in one place their whole life and they don't move, right? That's what sessile means. Okay, so these guys, right? You do a little dissection, right? Turns out they don't have a backbone. They are still an invertebrate. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Like, Chordata is the last phylum out there. The other phyla are the invertebrates. If there's, you know, there's got to be vertebrates in Chordata, but it turns out part of Chordata is still invertebrate, right? Invertebrate is not limited to phyla. It's more of a state of not having a vertebrate or not, right? So you shouldn't really use it as a group. But you see there are some invertebrate chordates out there, like this tunicate. Okay, so no notochord then. It probably doesn't have a brain either, like no dorsal nerve cord. So what is there to say that this thing is a chordate? How can we possibly come to this, how did scientists come to this conclusion that they're chordates? This looks nothing like it. It doesn't have any of the chordaten features. Where can we look to see if it has chordaten features? Larval stage. The larval stage never lies, and it'll show that it has this larva, which is known as tadpole larva, right? Why is it called tadpole larva? Because it looks like a tadpole, but not because it is a tadpole, okay? It's not a tadpole. Tadpole is a larva of an amphibian, right? That's separate. This is called tadpole larva. So make the distinction, tadpole, tadpole larva. Tadpole turns into a frog, tadpole larva turns into a sea squirt, okay? So it looks like a tadpole, so we call it tadpole larva. And if we, you know, look at it closely enough, what do we have? Gill slits, looks like a post-anal tail because its stomach is here and it ends right there. Dorsal nerve cord, notochord, got them all, right? All four chordaten features found inside the tadpole larva of a tunicate, right? Without this larval stage, you would probably call that tunicate, I don't know, a cnidarian or something, right? I mean, it doesn't look like a chordate at all, but you know, just keep it in your lab long enough that it reproduces, and then you'll see the babies that come out and dissect the babies and find that it's actually a chordate, right? So, pretty interesting. Zach?
If all those four things are useful, right?
Yeah.
Are those residuals that it chooses to not?
Oh, I see. So by the time it's an adult, it becomes vestigial. Yeah. So you might be able to see some remains of these things in the adult, right? I know it still has gills, right? The adult still has to have gills, so that's to be. But you don't really see any of these bigger features, right? And yeah, probably in the adult tunicate, they are vestigial. Yeah, good assumption. Okay, so tunicates, filter feeding sessile chordates that don't really have any chordaten features, but it's still chordate because when you look at its life history, it did have those features at one point. Okay, this is an example of a tunicate that swims around. It's called a larvation. This is supposed to be a GIF, but I guess it's not working this time. Here it is. It's just this little thing with a tail right here, and this big mass is not part of its body. It's actually a mucus house that it made itself. All right, and when it beats its tail, it swims, but also the water moves through this house, and the mucus, right? What is mucus designed to do? Catch particles, right? And so, what do you think this feeding style is? Filter feeding, just like the tunicates on the ground, right? Okay, so this is a tunicate that's pelagic, right? Pelagic means around in the water. Okay, so next group, subphylum Cephalochordata. Cephalo for head, chordata, yeah, chordata, right? The common name is called a lancelet. It's a small fish-like organism that usually lives in the sand. It can move, but it prefers to stay put. So, just from that, what do you think its feeding style is? Filter feeding, right? Just prefers to stay put. Okay, so it's a filter feeder. I don't want to get too far into lancelets. Okay, but it's a really interesting missing link, if you want to call it, in all of Chordata, because this is basically like a fish, except it doesn't have a backbone and other stuff that fish have. But I mean, look at the shape. Right? It's got a tail, its gills are here, it's got a mouth there. Right? So the lancelet, the missing link leading up to fish, actual vertebrates. What do you guys think? Are we ready to talk about actual vertebrates? Yeah? Okay. So, last group, right? Subphylum Urochordata, subphylum Cephalochordata, third subphylum Vertebrata, right? This subphylum is literally called Vertebrata. So as you guys can see, these guys are the ones with vertebrates, the backbone, vertebrae is the backbone, and then the other ones are still invertebrates, right? So there's three subphylum of the phylum Chordata, the third one being Vertebrata, and Vertebrata is our familiar organisms, right? I'm sure you guys know what all these things are. Classically, Vertebrata is said to have 5 groups, right? This is a classic 5: fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, right? But this is not entirely accurate, okay? Let me revise this phylogeny here and see if you guys can notice any differences. I added a couple. And what else did I change? What's happening? Birds are coming from reptiles. Turns out that birds are a type of reptile, which we'll see later, right? But yeah, let's talk about this part. Look, these 3 are really similar. That's a shark, that's a regular fish. Why do they have to be in separate groups, right? Shouldn't we just put them in the same group? They're all fish, right? A fish is an organism that's shaped like a torpedo with a tail and some fins, right? That's what a fish is. So why do we have 3 groups of fish? Okay, let's look at this question by looking back at our invertebrate phylogeny, right? Like this, okay? So this is what I showed you before, but it actually should look like this based off all the phylum I showed you. Right, it should look like this. Right here is where bilateral symmetry evolved, and suddenly there was a mass explosion of bilaterally symmetric organisms that all look similar, right? Why? Because bilateral symmetry was such a good, adaptation feature that evolution tried a bunch of different iterations of bilateral symmetry, and you can only try a bunch of things if they're all easy, right? You can mass produce easy things, you cannot mass produce difficult, complicated things. Right, so they mass produce something easy. Why? Because the worm shape is the easiest shape to have bilaterally symmetric qualities, right? Through gut, anterior, right? So the worm shape was the easiest, okay? The easiest shape. So going back to why there are 3 branches of fish, notice how the fish shape compared to these is the simplest, right? It's just an oval with fins on it. And it's kind of comparable to the worm shape. It is the easiest shape to have the dorsal nerve cord and the nodal cord, all right, which defines chordata. Okay, so when dorsal nerve cord and nodal cord evolved here, then nature, evolution tried a bunch of different iterations, and they were able to mass produce a fish shape because it was easy, right? So they tried 3 different iterations, and there we go, those 3. Okay, so we're gonna go through these one by one. I'm gonna attempt to get to reptiles again tomorrow. Hopefully I can finish the first one. We'll see if we have enough time. Okay, so let's talk about the first one, right? This is called a lamprey. Have you guys heard of the lamprey before? Yeah? And its mouth looks like this, right? This is a really peculiar mouth. Not because it's ugly or with all its teeth, okay, that's true, but the real peculiar part is it's not like your mouth. Your mouth goes and bites things. This thing cannot go and bite things. Everybody know why? It doesn't have any jaws. Its mouth is always open, like that. It can't close its mouth, right? It doesn't have, jaws have not evolved in this group, right? It's very primitive. And even normal fish have jaws, right? So, right, these guys don't have jaws, right? Together with hagfish, lamprey and hagfish form the first class of subphylum vertebrata of phylum Chordata, Agnatha. All right? Nath, the G means jaws. Remember ketonatha? And what does A mean? Without or no, right? No jaws. Class Agnatha. See, these Agnathans, they don't have jaws. So how do they eat, right? How do you eat if you don't have jaws, right? The jawless fish. Okay? What do you guys think? How would you eat if you don't have jaws, Zach?
They're like leeches.
Okay, so that is true about lampreys. They are like leeches, and what do leeches do? They suck. Okay, suction is something that you can do without jaws, right? Suction is a good way of eating. But as for hagfish, they do another type. They do scraping, right? Like a shovel. Okay, what did I just highlight? What are those? Gills. Okay, good. So we can cross off one of the chordata features, right? It's got gills for sure, right? Gill slits, tail, right? But let's take a look at its internal skeleton. That's it. That's it. Why didn't I show you the rest of it? It doesn't have any bones here. That's all it has. A skull. It just has a skull, a cranium, right? And gill arches to support its gills. It doesn't have anything else. So what does that imply about this? It's still an invertebrate. Isn't that crazy? This is basically a fish at this point. It's in the subphylum Vertebrata, yet it does not have a vertebrae. Right? So even within the subphylum, we have invertebrates, right? Agnathans, they only have a skull, and their skull is made out of cartilage. Okay? So it's pretty primitive, right? You guys have a skull, but you guys have much more than that. Plus, your skeleton is not made of cartilage, you have bone, which is better, right? Strong. Do you have a brain? Yes, they do have a brain. Remember, bilaterally symmetric organisms have a brain. And bilateral symmetry evolved back on Wednesday. Okay, so that's all they have for the skeleton. A cartilaginous skull, right? They got gill slits, and still they don't have a backbone, right? That's crazy. I want to start you guys off on a table of all the vertebrates, okay? So in vertebrata, if you were paying attention, there is 7 classes, okay? Agnatha being the first one. So make sure you guys have like a blank sheet of paper to do this with. And we're gonna start giving features to each of these classes and seeing how the features change and get better over time. All right, we'll start off with a couple of them. The first one is, we'll go with, let's see, presence of jaws, okay? And the second one we'll say it's a breathing structure, okay? We'll go with that. And third, we will say this one, skeleton. Okay? So we are gonna add 7 things here, so 6 more. And down here, we're gonna add probably about like 4 or 5 more different features. But for now, we're gonna start off with these 3 of Agnatha. So, class Agnatha, jaws or no jaws? No. Okay. What does it use for its breathing structure? Gills. Okay. And what is its skeleton?
Cartilage.
It's made out of cartilage, and it is only a skull. Okay, so we'll put that down. Skull made out of cartilage. Okay, so we'll see how this updates. Okay, you guys can keep referring back to this table and updating it as we go through all the different classes. Okay, and we're gonna add more things to here too. So make sure you guys leave enough room. Okay. You guys can always remake the table later. Okay, I'm sure by the time I finish this table, someone's just gonna come here and take a picture of it. And that works too. Okay. All right. So yeah, pretty primitive stuff, right? We mentioned this earlier. How do you eat with no jaws again? Suction, and in the case of the hagfish, right, scraping, right? Clearly they cannot do raptorial feeding. You need 2 sides to do that. Right? They only have 1 side, no jaws. Okay, so here is the leech-like activity that Zach was talking about, right? Here's the bass, and it's being blood is being sucked by these lampreys, right? Okay, and then over here I have a video. Let me just show you this video real quick. Okay, so this is a whale fall ecosystem.
The total dampness of the deep ocean, probably another grey whale, a 30-ton adult. It settled here only a few weeks ago. Already, it has attracted hundreds of hagfish. These scavengers, over half a metre long and as thick as your arm, are only found in the deep sea. They have been attracted by the faint whiff of decay suffusing through the water for miles around. With their heads buried in the whale's flesh, they breathe through gill openings along the sides of their bodies. They're very primitive creatures, not even true fish, for they lack jaws. They feed not by biting, but by rasping off flesh with 2 rows of horny teeth. In just a few hours, a hagfish can eat several times its own weight of rotting flesh.
Okay, so how do they eat, right? They have like the meat of the whale, and then it just uses its teeth to dig up against the whale, and then it just swims forward. So it acts like a shovel, right? A shovel doesn't pick things up like a claw. It just has 1 side, right? So it totally works, right? You can use that scraping style if you don't have any jaws. Okay. Just want to show you a couple more clips before we finish, so hold tight. Here's a quick video of deep sea.
Brought them up in bait traps and they were kind of like crawling out of it.
Yeah.
And on the front porch I heard.
I tried to. Which?
Watch this.
Oh.
Looks like it's going for the knot.
Oh.
Oh,
wow. No, wow. Oh, that's so great.
Okay. So I just thought that was a really cool video that shows it. Okay, I agree. That was kind of cringy, right? I don't get that excited over this. But maybe for a crab, maybe. But look, it tied itself in a knot, right? You know, it's really common to see limbless creatures tie themselves in knots. Okay, so I'm talking like eels, anacondas, right? They'll tie themselves in a knot because they don't have limbs. It's a way of pretending you have a limb if you don't. Because if you guys look at what happened, like look at it pulling its body through this loop right there. Okay, see, like it pulls its head through that loop. So if it's, imagine that you're trying to pull something off of something else, right? Maybe you're trying to open a door, right? Opening a door is pulling the door off the wall, basically, right? So when you do that, you usually rely on the friction on the ground, but if that's not enough, you'll put an arm on the wall to brace it, and you'll pull it they don't have the limbs. So what do? They create like an artificial limb by wrapping the rest of their body around their head, which is their arm in this case, right? So they can use this part of their body that they're pulling their head through to brace up against the wall or whatever they're trying to pull off. Okay? So instead of pulling like this, they're kind of like pulling like this. Right? They use that part of their body to brace themselves. Okay, that's how they can pull meat off of things even though they don't have limbs. Right? Because you should, think about it. You take it for granted because you have limbs and you never have to deal with this. But what if you were to go around just like biting things off of something, right? And like you're only not allowed to use your hands, you're only allowed to bite, right? And here's a piece of meat, you bite onto it, how do you take it off? You can't move your head back into your body like a turtle or anything, right? So what would you do? You would curl your body and it creates distance and that pulls it off, right? That's what they're trying to do in that knot tying mechanism, right? So a lot of limbless creatures go into knots to add a little brace. That's pretty cool. What's this, by the way? It's a sea cucumber in phylum. Yeah, Echinodermata. Anybody remember the class? Holothroidea. Right? Okay, hold tight. We're almost finished. Okay, so you guys can check these at home. Okay, hold tight, everybody. I want to show you guys a couple more clips before I finish. So, quiet down, please. Okay, so I want to show you defense mechanism of a hagfish. What happens when you disturb a hagfish? What will it do? So here's a hagfish in the tank, and this guy is acting like a predator. That the hagfish has released a chemical into the water that turns it extremely viscous and sticky, right? That like mucus snot-like substance. What do you think would happen if something tried to eat it? Yeah, that stuff would get stuck in its throat and in its gills, and that would be potentially dangerous for whoever tried to eat it, right? So that's the defense mechanism of a hagfish is to release a chemical that produces slime, right? And then that just happens when they're stressed out. So watch what happens when you get a bunch of these hagfish stressed out, right? Watch this video right here. Look at that. If I didn't watch this video, I thought the picture was Photoshop, but look at all that slime. That's nasty. Okay. All right, cool. Okay, so we're done with this class. Good. Not this class. I meant this class of organisms, right? Agnatha. Before you guys go, what does Agnatha mean again? Yeah, jawless fish, right? Fish that don't have jaws, no jaws. Okay. So make sure you guys finish that worksheet. It's gonna be due tonight. It will be worth points, and then I'll give the solutions out like immediately tonight. The worksheet that you get, actually I'm gonna give it to you guys right now. Yeah, I printed it out for you guys. Worksheet 7, Chordata, number 1, goes all the way up to fish. So this one is gonna be not due, but is good for you guys to practice. And I'll just give you guys the solutions. That way, we'll practice. Okay, you guys, I will see you guys tomorrow.